everybody, to the Real Collective podcast. Happy to have you here. As always, feel free to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this with somebody who you might find this interesting. You can book an appointment directly with me in the Calendly link below. We have a special guest today, Mike Chan, my good friend, longtime client. We've done a bunch of business together. Mike actually helped me understand things from an investor point of view when I was first licensed probably 10 years ago or so. And we've had a great working relationship so far. Mike, thanks so much for joining.
No problem.
Good
morning.
Mike does a lot of work with local investors, working with local investor groups, Oreo and the like, and gives back a lot to the community. It helps a lot of people who are getting started with coaching and mentoring and understanding what Ottawa is like and how it's different. A lot of investors talk about things from a either Canada-wide perspective or a Ontario-wide perspective, but Mike looks at it from a much better, much more hyper-local way, and I think that's important, especially because Ottawa is different. There is a lot of confusion in the market. People don't know what's going to happen with rates. People don't know what's going to happen with prices. Nobody really has a crystal ball. But one thing that I really like, Mike, is that you really do a deep dive in terms of your data analysis, and you use that information to inform the investment decisions that you make. So I'll let you expound on that.
Yeah, so I guess I'll give a little bit of history. I got into this around 14, 15 years ago. And if we go even a little bit further back from that, it actually started with our first house purchase back in 2005. And we did that. Now I know the term for it. It's a house hack.
Yeah.
Back then we were just like, oh, there's a basement and we can fix it up a little bit. We can put somebody in there to kind of offset the costs. Yeah. When we bought the house in around the downtown area, it was $300,000, and at that time we thought it was insanely expensive.
Yes,
because we could buy something for I think at that time, even like 190, 200.
Yeah.
Out in the burbs, right? So spending that extra 100 was a lot for us, but at the same time, we also did it with a certain ecological mindset going, we can get away with one car because me as an engineer, our offices were all downtown. My work was downtown. I was working for the government, and my wife had a 5-minute commute. So that was part of the reason why we also bought where we did in the downtown core area. But because of the extra cost, we were like, well, how do we kind of offset it? And it was just a simple concept of saying, well, we'll rent out the space that we're not going to be using, because at the time it was just my wife and I.
Right.
And it's kind of funny because to this day we still rent it out.
Oh, good.
Even though our family's expanded and we're just like, oh, we should be able to make do because I'm from Hong Kong, you're from Korea. This is still luxury, the amount of space we have.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even though we doubled the density of our family. So it's kind of funny.
Yeah. But it's if you're used to it, you're used to it.
Yeah. And then how we got into real estate after that was we walked into a bank and there was a financial planner and they're like, oh, we'd love to help you plan out your future retirement. And we're like, okay, we're game. And we're the perfect demographic. We're 30 something, just had a kid. So they want to open an RESP for us. And then they want to talk about RRSPs. And then when we did all the math, it was like, oh, you'll retire at 85. And we're like, how is that possible? Like theoretically, based on our jobs and what we do, how is it that we're going to be destitute?
Yeah.
Like in retirement, if I retired at 65, we'd be destitute. So it didn't make much sense to us. And then with my background in housing and in buildings, I was like, okay, let's see if I can leverage what I know. And that's one thing I try to encourage people I meet that want to get into real estate. I'm always about the education is important, but also what you know about housing, leverage that.
Right.
Like what you know, like who you deal with on a daily basis. That can inform you about the type of housing you want to get into in terms of the type of tenants you want, in terms of the, like if you live in a condo right now, an apartment, yeah, you might be better off doing, sorry about that. You might be better off getting into that type of space because you know that space. There's
Right.
certain things you know how condo boards work, but you may not know as much how much a roof should be fixed or what you should be concerned about when you get a house. Like there might be a boiler you have to be worried about, but if you're buying an apartment, you don't have those concerns. So I always tell people leverage what you know first,
Yeah.
because whatever you know is going to be invaluable. Like what I know in my space was what I knew. I knew how buildings stand up. So my whole thing was I can go look at, let's say, a building that doesn't show well, but I can tell if the bones are going to be good or bad. So I leveraged that part of what I knew.
Yeah.
So, and being an engineer, we're pretty conservative. We're a super, super conservative bunch. So I think I read up at least for at least 18 to 24 months, like any book I could get my hands on, from like The Rich Dad Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki, to Don Campbell. He's a Canadian investor out in BC there.
Yes.
And I just read everything I could get my hands on. Those are actually, I would say, some of the books. I'll recommend maybe some a bit more, but I got into it going, I don't want to pay thousands of dollars to get educated in the sense of that type of tuition. Because I found that almost to be counterproductive, because I'm like, that's money I could be putting into a house.
Exactly.
And on a certain level, I would say I can learn at my own pace if I'm reading a book. And then I can compare notes as well. So for me, that's the way I kind of got educated in the space. And a big part of it was figuring out numbers. So even from the very onset, I started looking at the MLS almost religiously every day, and trying to compare numbers, trying to understand markets. Even though we talk about Ottawa as a market, there's literally pockets within neighborhoods. Like you can look at Alta Vista and you can go, well, how far does that go? What are the boundaries? Within Alta Vista, there's Elmville Acres. There's, I think, an Applewood something in there. There's Ridgemont area. So even within those areas, understanding the dynamics within those areas, because I find like in Alta Vista, once I kind of pass Kilbourne South, my price changes like around $60,000, right? Yeah. If I go up one block, it goes up 60. If I go up another block up to Crestview, now I'm up maybe 100 to 150,000. So those things are important, and we'll talk about that a bit later. But in my education, that's what I did, is I started to look at everything from a general to kind of a very focused part of neighborhoods, and understanding like, okay, is there buses there? What's the rental market like? Because for us, it was always about building a buy and hold portfolio. So we weren't really looking at flips. Like now we do some flips, maybe one every 18 months. It's really far in between. Sean kind of knows that. Almost the whole model of what we do as investments is over time. We want it to grow. We want to see equity growth, and we get some cash flow. That essentially is how we're looking at buying. And we also looked at Ottawa as a business model itself. If we buy a property, what should it be? Let's say cash flowing, or how much income, like even more basic than that, how much income should I get versus my expenses, which is really, I guess I usually call it, like, if I can't explain the house on a napkin or the property on a napkin, I don't want to buy it. Like, if it's that complex at the end of the day, I just don't want to deal with anything, because for us, real estate is really that simple. I mean, we can come up with 10 different variations of formulas to arrive at the same spot.
Right.
I always call it, because the ratios are always the same.
Yeah.
And the other thing, the biggest thing I took out of all the books at the end of the day is always buy value. It's like Warren Buffett says, you know what you're buying and buy value. So for me, what value means is somebody has a problem in terms of they want to offload the property. We're willing to buy it with no fuss. We'll close on it, but this is the price we can offer based on our business model. So if I can buy, for us, if we can buy between, 90 cents or less on the dollar, we normally would do it, because that protects us, protects our investors, protects the investment itself. It allows us to take money out in I guess, a faster fashion than, let's say, 60 months. We can kind of whittle it down to between 12 and 18 if we're buying on value. And then that allows us to grow. Like, that's one of the key strategies we use.
Yeah. So the idea is, if the fair market value for a property is, let's say, $500,000, you want to be buying it for $450 at the most. Right. Yeah. Got it. Okay. Cool. Now, you made a point that sort of triggered something in my mind about what I know that you do. And I know that you're connected with certain, like, Ottawa support programs where they help you offset the tenants, or help you place tenants, or get, more money from the tenants. How did you get linked in with that section?
So I would say when you first start out, and this is something now I'll get into that a bit further after, but when you first start out, just do it for profit. Do not have any inkling that you need to give back in any way, because you're starting at the bottom. So once we got to a certain size, I think we were past around 40 or 50 units at that point. Then just walking around a neighborhood one day, that's outside of normally where we go. It's just by chance. There was, I think, a lady, they're doing a barbecue outside. I started talking to this lady, and it happened to be a group home. And they were actually getting, I guess, reno evicted essentially. Mm-hmm. And then we started talking, and it just became like, oh, you guys do this. Oh, that's really interesting. Then I think it took around 6 to 8 months where I really studied the space of what they currently had, what made it successful, and what we found with, let's say, I'm using homeless people as a very general term, but I would say, like, the type of homelessness we deal with is from refugees. So we deal with refugees as one type of homelessness. So you have to think about it. Somebody comes from another country. A lot of them don't even speak the language.
Yeah.
They've been accepted by the government, so they're living out of a hotel. So their kind of homelessness is not the type of homelessness that I think most people equate to, but they are considered homeless.
Right.
Because they're literally living out of a hotel.
Right.
So there's that group that we deal with. And then there's also people that have gone through an addictions program. And what they need is they need a group home support. Because the way the government runs right now is a lot of times the government's like, oh, once you're done your program, we want to send you off living by yourself.
Right.
Because the ultimate goal is for people to be quote unquote independent.
Yeah, rehabilitated.
Right. Yeah. But from at least my rudimentary understanding of that is that a lot of these people still need support.
Yeah.
In terms of community support, so from each other.
Yeah.
So what we went out to do then is to create a model where by design, we created these 4 or 5 bedroom units that a group of these folks could live together. And it's the same with the refugees.
Right.
A lot of times they're maybe a couple, but a lot of them are just single, one person. And to stick them in a bachelor apartment is usually not a solution for success. Right. Because they need community. They need people that even speak their own language. Like imagine going to a country, 24 hours a day, you got literally aliens walking around you just doing stuff that you're not even familiar with and not even speaking something that you understand, right? So it's super tough for these people, right? And what we found where we get success is we put them in with people that speak their language, that cook the same food. Yeah. And then we surround them with support. So we give them furniture. Like there's a furniture bank that operates. We give them language training. We give them employment. So they get experience. They get Canadian experience. Yeah. A lot of times these people don't get hired because it's like, oh, you're from an ocean away. We don't think you know how to work, even though I'm pretty sure work is exactly the same in ocean away as it here. You have to wake up, go to your job, do the work. Yeah. But somehow that type of experience is just not recognized for whatever reasons, right? So
it's cool you said by chance, but the thing that stood out in my mind is you were out and doing stuff. Right. You weren't sitting behind a computer. You were out there in the world. And yes, chance happened, but chance happened because you were out and you were engaging in the community. Right. And so it wasn't by chance. It was, it wasn't, you weren't going out to look for it, but you found it because you were out and you were doing what you needed to be doing in the community. So another question I had is, you mentioned at the very beginning about ecological, and you use that with regards to your personal house. And I would say, knowing what I know about you, that's something that you've had sort of in your mind, in the back of your mind, as you work on your different projects. That it's not just about, not just about the bottom dollar. It's about the world that we live in as well, right? And so I hear that when you're speaking as well.
Yeah, I think that's the thing is a lot of times people feel like green costs more. And a lot of times I would argue green is a choice that if you're smart about it will actually save you money.
Yeah.
Like the prime example I tell people is the flooring we put in is normally twice the price of the cheapest flooring you could put in. And you can go, yeah, that can, let's say, double the price of a project. But my argument to that is not really, because at the end of the day, the guy laying the floor is still going to charge the same amount. He doesn't care if it's $1 a square foot or $2 a square foot. Yeah. He's going to charge you the same price. Like your quarter rounds that you have to put in after, that costs the same amount. So I would say putting in better product that can life cycle better. So that really, that term really is, life cycle is what's the best use in terms of material that you're going to put in place for the type of tenants you're going to have, and what do you expect to do? Do you expect to replace this floor in 2-3 years? Like to me, when you look at a McDonald's, right? They've got a plan to replace everything in 5 years. Like any McDonald's I've ever walked in, I don't think it's older than 5 years.
Yeah.
So the product that they're choosing is designed for 5 years of use.
Right.
And I would say most homeowners, but like the places I go into, you know, if it's a 1950s built house, the floors are still in amazing condition because they wanted that floor to last 40 years.
Yeah.
It's not at the time that they couldn't put in a cheaper floor. There was cheaping floor out there, just like today, right? Yeah. But somebody had in mind that they wanted this floor to last 40, 50, 60 years. So they put in a product that would withstand that. So I would say anybody doing a reno in this type of space shouldn't be thinking, oh, I'm going to have tenants, they're going to break stuff, they're going to abuse it. And I'm just going to put in the cheapest thing possible because I'm thinking of replacing it, because there are products out there that will take the abuse. You just have to kind of look it up and just put it in. Like we've had stuff in for 10, 12 years now, and it's never been a problem. Yeah. Like we just wash it. Like the tenant may not clean it as well, but we go back in, we wash it, and it looks brand new.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to stop. I want to pick your brain about your expectations for the market in the second half. So we'll jump into that. As always, guys, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, share this with anybody who you think might find this information valuable. You can book an appointment with me in the Calendly link down below, and have a quick word from probably our sponsors, which is us, and we'll see you back on the other side.
This episode of the Real Collective podcast is brought to you by Real Collective. Real Collective brings together best-in-class real estate agents and collective experts in the field to deliver the best possible service to our clients. We govern ourselves with honesty, open-mindedness, and compassion. With diverse skill sets, our agents are able to better serve a wide array of clients, including first-time buyers, first-time sellers, transferees, estate sales, investors, and rural, vacation, and luxury properties. Authenticity and transparency are pillars of our process, which allows us to put our clients at the center of everything we do. Our years of experience and knowledge allow us to deliver prestigious service and optimal results. If you are interested in buying or selling your home, contact us today at realcollective.ca.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Real Collective podcast. I'm Sean Tasse with our special guest, Mike Chan. As always, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share with anybody who might find this valuable. You can schedule an appointment in the link below, the Calendly link below. And if you're watching us on YouTube, great. If you're not, have a look for it on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Now, we opened up and talked a little bit about your business, and I wanted to see if there's a way that all of your knowledge and insight you can expound on for the viewers in the second half, talking a little bit about, you know, what you did specifically to ensure that your business was in good standing as the market did some crazy, you know, dip dives last year, and what your expectations are for this year in terms of, you know, rates and price points and the particularities that you notice in the market in Ottawa. So I know that's a mouthful to cover, but jump in and let us know what you're thinking.
Sure. So there's a couple ways to dissect that in terms of protecting your investment or even an investment you're getting into. So for us, I think the number one thing is kind of, we touched on it earlier, is we buy value. I would say if we look at Ottawa historically, like I think this is the third time in 50 years the market has been this volatile. Yeah. Where we saw a plus minus of more than 3% in a given year. Because I think if you look historically, things usually move up 1 or 2%. I think we've been kind of blessed in the past 15 years. It's gone up maybe 1 to 0.5%. And there hasn't been these huge decreases. And in my years of actually owning property, I think last year was the first time I ever seen anything move in 6 months as fast as it did.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I'm talking to agents who've been in business for 40 years, and they're saying we've never seen movement like such a drop off, so significant and so fast.
But at the same time, I've also never seen an acceleration as fast. Like it went up so fast in 2021 into 2022. Like that I did not see in terms of, like, we do a lot of data analytics, and we did not see that coming at all. I mean, at the end of 2019 or going into I guess mid 2019 September, this is before the pandemic hit. One thing that may have been an interesting indicator is the market was getting pretty warm back then. And I noticed Minto had actually overnight raised their prices in September by, I think it was 120,000 for a new build out in Canada. And then by December, they raised it another 120,000. So they went up 300,000 in the course of 6 months then.
Yeah.
And the prices held. Like, people were still lining up for new builds. And that kind of didn't change, surprisingly, even through the pandemic. You'd think with all the isolation and everything else, like, why are people going up and buying houses? But I think that we can now look at 2020 hindsight. People just weren't spending money.
Yeah.
So they were literally amassing tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
From not going out.
Yeah.
And that's what really drove the market in I would say, in places where you would traditionally want to park money, like in housing, that's one.
Yeah.
But it actually grew markets that never existed.
Yes.
So one example I would have is like Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Why did Bitcoin? That was an asset because people were looking to convert their money into an asset that really was still money to a certain degree. It was just in a different form.
Yes.
That's what people wanted to do. So I guess long and short of it, for us, we didn't change our business model because we always saw Ottawa still. I know the cap rates kind of, because of the price increases, cap rates maybe dropped to, I think I even heard 2%.
Yeah.
2.5%. Our cap rates always had sat around, when we would even look at a house, between 5.5 and 5.5. Usually with some construction conversion, we would hit around 8.
Yeah.
Cap. That's usually what we targeted in our modeling. So, and that's the thing, like, Sean's known me for, about 10 years, and I always tell him, like, cap rate hasn't changed. Ottawa's still the same. So for us, we were protected in the sense that just because the pricing went up, we actually did not change our model. We didn't feel like it necessitated a change. And that a lot has to do with where the government, and this is more almost, we could devote another podcast to this, is government policy in terms of lending. So within the Ottawa market, the big 5 banks lend to a certain ratio of, between 3.5 and 4 times your gross income. And to me, that's what's supporting pricing.
Right.
To a large extent, because any new home buyer going into the market, that's what they can take out.
Yeah.
From an insured mortgage point of view, and that's what we're willing to lend to. So we saw that as kind of, unless that benchmark changes, then maybe we need to change the business model to a certain degree. And at the same time, we also saw rents essentially take a drastic skyrocketing trajectory up in the past, I would say 3 to 4 years.
Yeah.
Like now, like I think a 1 bedroom is almost what, 1,800.
Yeah.
In certain spots, like I'm looking in Parkdale, 2,600 for a 2 bedroom.
So your cash flow has really been good, and it's the fact that you had this you had this portfolio built in advance. I don't think you bought a lot of places as the market was doing some crazy stuff, unless we were finding some really, like you said at the beginning, some really junky houses that were in good shape that were underselling, sort of thing, right? Like that's.
I guess my take on it is there's around 12,000 to 18,000 houses for sale every year that transact in Ottawa. Okay. Sure. There's probably more that are listed, but those don't sell.
Yeah.
And I always tell you, Sean, I only need to buy 3 or 4.
Yeah.
I'm not buying the 18,000, so I'm not as worried. So I'm like, I just need to find the 3 or 4 that work for our numbers.
Yeah.
Right. If this works for our numbers, that's great. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And we actually, like, the other part of where we save a lot of money is we've developed a construction crew, and these are salaried people within our company. They exclusively work for us. So I don't have to worry if somebody's going to show up or not. If I have an emergency, I send one of the guys out, they go fix it. It almost never is an issue. From a staffing perspective, or where tenants get upset because things aren't getting addressed because I can't find a carpenter.
Right. Yeah, because you've already got.
Yeah, so that's a big part of where we found we maybe, let's say, on a one-time basis, you can make an argument we're paying maybe a premium because we couldn't find some guy on Kijiji, right? On a one-time basis. But if I tell you, you have to do 10 projects this year, right?
Yeah.
And go do it all off on Kijiji, you're kind of blowing your brains out trying to get 8 projects done. 1, 2, dealing with warranties. 3, dealing with stuff not getting done properly.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So I think that's where we save the most. Like right now, I think charge outs are between 65 and, let's say, 95 an hour.
Right. Yeah.
If you hire a company or anybody, right? Or just a private person, you're maybe at 65. Our base run cost, I think, is around 50.
Yeah.
Right. So that's where I can honestly say on paper, this is where we're saving money. And at the same time, like, our guys are trained on materials we use day in, day out.
Right.
So the flooring that we use has been the same for the past 10 years. Right. So people get used to doing it. And at the same time, we also do quality of life for our employees.
Yeah.
So nobody works weekends.
Yeah, you do.
Just go in Monday to Friday, get the job done. Sometimes we understand, like, certain days you go into a project and it feels like you've done nothing. You may be just readjusting an event that took 6 hours to do, because once you start moving one thing, another thing, and another thing, and we know, like, for certain companies that don't foresee things like that, that's where it becomes issues, and then they start cutting corners. Whereas for us, we just tell our guys, like, look, we understand. Certain days you go do something, and it's like, even in the office, certain days I go in and I'm like, I got nothing accomplished all day. I sent one email out, but I was putting fires out everywhere, except doing my own job. Right. So there's that stuff like that happens, and having your own company gives you the freedom to really manage jobs how they should be done, so things get done properly and correctly the first time around, and we're not going back constantly because we just try to cut a corner.
Yeah. Well, it's the same thing as choosing the floors that are a little bit more expensive. You're better to spend a little bit more and get it right than to try and cheap out and make a mistake and have to go back and fix it. The last piece that I wanted to pick your brain about was when we had a conversation, we were talking about, there's some of the local unions are coming to settlements, and all of that is going to sort of crescendo into people in Ottawa specifically having a little bit more disposable income that they might not have had before, and combine that with, this sort of doom and gloom idea that the sky is falling, the sky is falling. I just did the numbers for the end of Q1. We're actually up on the residential sector by $55,000, even though we were down by $200,000 in the residential sector, through the great reset that we had in 2022. So, a lot of people listen to the year over year numbers. They don't really pay attention to the month over month numbers. And I think you're going to I'm not connected to the same information sources that you are. So what are you hearing in terms of, or what are you expecting to see over the course of the rest of this year with regards to buyer sentiment?
Yeah, so I think the Bank of Canada has a couple of white papers out on this. Interest rates usually take 6 months for people to digest.
Yeah.
This is the first time the Fed has raised the rates as much as they have, quarter over quarter. And usually it's 6 months. Maybe it's going to blend out into more of an 8-month kind of calming down of the markets, you could call it, where people digest it. Because even underwriters are having difficulty trying to understand these types of drastic changes. But as people like within the sector, because a lot of times we just see it as like, you just see it as a buyer, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
For me, because we're actually in it, in the sense that we are masters of our own house, in the sense that everything we worry about financing, we worry about insurance, we worry about the underwriting, we worry about the refi. So, and those are all almost completely different components that are all linked to this interest rate thing. So if you go, what's the commonality within everything, right? So the example is our insurance is coming back for renewal this, I think, next month, right? Now I have to go back and actually rejig all my rebuild numbers because I don't want to be underinsured, right?
Right.
So you can go like from an interest rate point of view, like what does this effect have, right? So for somebody like investors like us, where we see everything, the insurance companies are taking longer to underwrite. The actual finance departments are taking longer to underwrite. People that are doing in the refi business are taking longer to underwrite because now they're looking at like, oh, you used to be able to take, let's say up to, I think it's 80% of your loan to value on your house, right? But that, a lot of people don't realize is that's also blended out onto how much money you make.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. So now that we've increased the interest rate, well, how does that actually affect that whole number? So it's not just as simple as going, well, why can't somebody just readjust to an extra $200 payment?
Right.
It's a little bit more complex than that. And I think that's part of it too, is that people are taking longer to reach out. So when I talk to my finance partner, it used to be one telephone call. Do we want to finance this building?
Right.
It's going to be at X percentage, right? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Now it's like, okay, Mike, just pump the brakes. Can you give me 2 days to figure this out? Let me relook at the numbers, because people are cautious, right? Because people want to be repaid back on whatever they're putting out. Or if they're going to have to insure something, they want to know, what are we actually in for if something does happen?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that's working through the system. And I think now we're coming kind of out the other end. Answers are now, like the example is, like I talked to a financing person just yesterday, and they were able to almost give me an answer back over the phone saying, yeah, that won't be a problem. Where go back even a month, that person would be like, no, let me get back to you. I'm going to look at it one more time. Now it's more like, oh, okay, that's what you're looking at. Yeah, we got no problems with that. And I think those are the little things that give people confidence.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
you go. Sorry.
Yeah. So I think with all that in mind, we're also now seeing, the example is you go into Home Depot, a 2x4 actually looks reasonable now.
Yes.
We're not paying $10 for that 2x4.
Yeah.
So people that are looking at going in, and I would say most, like 80% of the people that buy a house or a home look at renovating the house in the next 5 years.
Sure.
So there's always something that they're willing to take the house as is, let's say, but they're like, yeah, within the next 5 years, we'd like to remodel X.
Yeah.
Right. And if they go into Home Depot and they see a $10 2x4, they're going to be like, oh, that's really expensive.
Yes.
Right. And now that we're seeing everything come back down to, I would say, what the actual market price is for things.
Yeah.
People have more confidence. They're like, yeah, I can buy a house. I can do the renovation.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right.
So it's a good segue to finish this off. Is what is it that you need? I know that part of your business model involves partnering with other people. So if somebody wants to get into investing and hasn't done it before, can they reach out to you? And if they can, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Probably the best way to get a hold of me is through Sean, through you.
Fair. Yeah, I can do that.
Yeah, we have a website, AMG Home.ca. They can contact me through there.
Yeah.
Drop us a line.
Yeah.
We're a pretty tight-knit investor group. We try to get to know you. We try to align our values, our vision with the investor. So what that means for us is if you're looking to flip, that's not something we do. What we're trying to do is to try to build homes for people. We're renting out homes to people. If you look at our tagline is your home now.
Yeah.
Because our mission statement at the end of the day is to give people a home. It's not to try to make as much as possible off them in that sense.
Right.
We're trying to provide them housing that's up to date, that's maintained, because they're getting a product, and that's our product.
Yes.
Right. And that's what we're striving to do. And making money, or you can say the profit at the end of the day, is we're looking at using that to get another home that we can fix up and supply to somebody else. So that's really our model at the end of the day. So yeah, I think that's the best way to kind of describe what we do as investors. And that's for some people, and that's not for some people that we found out, right? So usually it's a process. We get to know you over several months. Because at the end of the day, you have to work with the group of people that you're invested with. We all need to get along.
Absolutely. Cool. Well, listen, thanks very much for joining me. This was a lot of fun. I think I learned a few things that I didn't exactly know about your business before. So it's nice to do this and get into it. So yeah, if you guys want to reach out to Mike, or if you're interested to pick his brain more, reach out to me. I'm happy to put you in touch, or check out amghome.ca. And yeah, if you'd like, obviously hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and all that good stuff. You can book an appointment directly with me if you'd like in the Calendly link below. Check us out on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And until next time, keep it real, collective.